أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. And Assalamu alaikum. We've got an episode today, and I have a special guest speaker with me. It's an episode that has been requested a lot. It's from a specific question that I get from many of my sisters in this community asking about money and marriage, and specifically about the premarital conversations, or when you're looking to get married, what kind of conversations should you be having about money? And many of my sisters are actually quite shy to have this conversation, because when they do try to bring it up, they're told, oh, you know what, are you just a gold digger, or are you all about money? And their families may even tell them, don't be so fussy, don't be so materialistic. And so we have sisters feeling very conflicted about, should the money conversation happen? Should it not happen? What does providership mean? And so before we dive into it, and it's going to be quite a topic, subhanAllah, I want to introduce you to my guest, and her name is Mona. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mona. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
I'm going to try and limit it. Sorry. I'm going to try and limit everything about Mona to a little bio, but obviously she is this very, very dynamic, amazing human being, as you will find out in this episode, inshallah. She's based in the UK. She's a mother of two, married for 12 years, mashallah. She's also a published author of children's Islamic books. So if you go into your Islamic bookstore, yesterday, in fact, I was at a bookstore and I saw your book, Mona, and I was like, and she's also very active in the community and has been working in madrasas for, as she describes it, most of her life. Mona, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so Mona, you and I wanted to have this episode, and we wanted to chat about it. And I want to really set the context here and the tone. For many of you who already are in my community and listen to my podcasts or watch my videos, you know that any advice that I give, anything that I'm sharing with you guys, comes from the experience of facilitating thousands of clients, alhamdulillah, over the last decade, and a bit more than a decade, alhamdulillah. And also some of it will be filtered by my personal experiences. But in this situation, we're going to be discussing money and marriage and what it means to seek a husband who is a good provider, who is a good protector, who is what Allah describes as a Qawwam. What should you be looking for? We're going to be discussing this from a psychosocial perspective. And we're also going to be giving our perspective, having been married. I've been married for 18 years, mashallah. I have two children. And, you get experience. You see a lot of things. You see your friends go through things. You go through things. And that really changes your perspective from when you first got married. I know I see marriage and love and romance extremely differently. I wish there were certain things that I knew, subhanAllah, back then, or that I could tell my friends back then, that what I know now, that has only come through experience. But in this podcast episode, Mona and I are going to try and hopefully shed some light for you guys on what should you be seeking in a partner, in a husband. What should you base your marriage on? What kind of conversations should you be specifically having around money and providership? And so, inshallah, hopefully this is a big topic. We're going to try and do it justice within an episode, inshallah. But let's hope it can help at least one person. Mona, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you're saying, and really, it's just we are coming from this from a place where, like you said, we have this lived experience, and if there's even one person who benefits from it, that's really why we're here, just to, shed some light on it and hopefully give some benefit to people who are listening.
Ameen. So Mona, you and I were chatting, before this episode, we were talking about providership and men being providers and protectors of women. And this is actually in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, in ayah number 34. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this and says that men are the providers and protectors. What's your perspective on this?
So it's really interesting you mentioned that because a few days ago, we've been talking about this episode, and I was just looking up like the definition of Qawwam, the word Qawwam, and um, how it's when you look at it, it comes from the word standing and like, Qama, like to stand, and how when you look at the tafsir, the definition is actually like a maintainer and a protector. But then when I was reading certain articles, like certain people have the way that they've changed that and how that's come into the community as somebody who has this authority, um, and should be listened to, and that they're smarter than women and know better than women. And I just thought that was so interesting because if you go to the root Arabic of it, it's actually like a protector and a maintainer, and how that's been changed so much, subhanAllah. Um, yeah, it was just something that it was shocking to me, like the two very, very different um perspectives, or the two ways that it's been used.
Yeah.
One going back to Arabic and one, by people. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think,
that took me by surprise, really. Just
yeah, subhanAllah. So, Mona, I think a lot of it has to do, and I speak about this a lot. You've heard me speak about it a lot, about the colonial influences and how our perception of what leadership is has been influenced by colonialism. Because according to that colonial perspective, a leader is, comes in and he tells everybody what to do and he bosses everybody around and what he says goes. And when you think about it, that is very, very, that's almost like the Fir'aun concept of leadership. Like Fir'aun, everyone was at the mercy of his whims and his fancies, and whatever he said went. And everybody had to tiptoe around him. And if he said something went, and there was no mashura, there was no empathy, there was no compassion. It was like, I have the power, you will submit to me. To the
a
extent
dictatorship.
that dictatorship, yes, leadership as a form of dictatorship. It's that Pharaonic one. And unfortunately, this has filtered into how people have interpreted being a leader in the household, being the man in the marriage. There's this toxic kind of interpretation that is more Pharaonic and that dictatorship, right? But then when you look, and this is another thing, right? Because if a man is coming in, and I don't know what you guys do in the UK, or I know you have a Sri Lankan background as well, Mona, but here, in the Desi community in South Africa, we call them samosa runs. When someone is interested in getting married, then the guy will go to different, suitable ladies' houses, sisters' houses, and then meet with the family, and then the family will fry samosas and some savories, and then the two will chat, with the chaperone being there, and then they'll kind of see whether or not they're marriage material. And this is essentially where people are having these conversations, and it can be quite awkward. And what I want to say is that the minute if a man comes through in that situation and says, you're a gold digger, or is hesitant to have the conversation about providership and what that means in the marriage, like what's his perspective on it? How does he intend on supporting you? How does he intend on supporting you financially, emotionally, morally? How does he plan on supporting you when you're pregnant, when you have children? What are his perspectives on this? And if the only thing that he can say is, are you a gold digger? Because I'm not looking for a gold digger. To me, that, Allah knows best, but that is suggesting that this man has not really deeply considered his role as a Qawwam, nor has he really looked at the sunnah of what that means. Because when you look at how leadership was displayed to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you see a lot of empathy, you see a lot of compassion, you see a lot of he was incredibly psychologically and emotionally attuned to people. If you just study a little bit of the Sirah, you see how all of his advice, all of his actions were customized to the context, to the nuances of that situation, to that specific person. He didn't deal with people in exactly the same way. He customized it using his intuition, using his deep insight. And so he had this character where people followed him and made him their leader because they loved him so much, and they loved him so much because he inspired such awe in people and such love in people because of the way he treated them. He did it with such respect. He did it with such understanding. And so people couldn't help but be enamored by him and want them to be his leader. And so when you think about that in the context of leadership, it's so different from this pharaonic kind of leadership, so-called leadership.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, it's so important, right? It's really, I think one of the leading questions that we need to come at it with women is, what is your definition of a leader, right? Like, you're going to lead this family. I think that's sometimes we don't ask people those questions. Like, what does being a leader mean to you? Because we know the hadith about, each of us being a shepherd and, and even if you look at shepherds, right? If they are if they're very strict and they have to be a certain way with their flock. Leaders have to win the hearts of the people. I mean, you can lead in different ways. Like you said, this pharaonic leadership, but then you're also going to have a very, very, either people are going to be walking on eggshells around you, or you're just going to be miserable, or, but if you want a loving home, and if you look at the verses in Surah Rum, that we see on all the wedding cards about what marriage is, it's the purpose is tranquility, right? It's about this having this sakina. I was listening to Sheikh Abdurrahman Murphy, and he was talking about how we expect the mawadda and rahma, but we don't bring the sakina, right? Like, and this is such a the mawadda and rahma bit come after the sakina. Like, you have to bring peace yourself. You have to maintain peace in order to win the love and the mercy of people. And if you're going to come at it with a very dictatorial kind of way, you're going to push people away. And also, I think, what you were talking about, even the Samusarad, it's really interesting because we have a similar concept in Sri Lanka. It's slowly changing now, where, again, in a chaperone setting, but we're giving young folk more of a chance, like more meets, because one meet, it's a big question to ask in one meet. You know what I mean? The first samosa like, hey, so what do you think about money? Like, you can't ask. You're just gauging. This is like a gauging. Am I even attracted to that person physically? Like, can I wake up to that nose for the rest of my life? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just gauging that in the beginning. And some of these questions, they need to take time. A lot of these conversations need to take time. And you can't, and I mean, in one sense, I understand why a man might be like, oh my God, she's a gold digger, if that's like the first question somebody brings up, or one of the first. So I don't agree with it, but if we're looking at it from men's point of view as well, it is one of those conversations that I think need to be spoken about before marriage is agreed upon, but within, like, not in the first meet kind of thing. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I think I love that you mentioned that, and I have a take on it, right? Because even this idea, even this notion that, it's like I can't bring up the topic of money just in the first couple of minutes. Obviously, they're going to think I'm a gold digger. I want to just explore where that even comes from, right? Where that comes
Yeah.
from, because historically, it's actually never been an issue to talk about money. Just before marriage, it's actually one of the main components. But when you look at the past few decades, that has changed. Now it's all like, oh, can't just talk about money. No, 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 it's a little bit taboo. It's a little bit. Let's look at where that's come from. And I was listening to, I need to pull up his name. I think it's Ustad Muhammad Ishaq, and he does such a good there's one lecture of his that he does it so well, where he speaks about, and he just made me giggle because at the end he gave these really good words, where he was talking in the lecture about how Disney and pop culture has really influenced us in so many ways, right? And at the end of his talk, he said, if there's anything good that I said that came from Allah, and if there was anything bad, it came from Disney and Shaitan. And I just found I just found it so apt. I just had a good giggle. But let's look at this underlying reason as to why we even have that filter, that it's forward to talk about money in the initial meeting before marriage. And I'm not going to give my opinion on whether I think it's the right or the wrong thing to do. I think just by exploring where that filter comes from, I think people will be able to make their own take their own understanding, make their own decision about whether or not to. And we have to consider, especially as millennials, right? Both of us are millennials, Mona, so we can really speak to this. And then it obviously goes down to Gen Z and the rest. But especially as millennials, we grew up on a specific kind of pop culture. And I remember from a young age, whether you were reading books or you were influenced, I mean, every one of us was influenced by the popular TV programs, movies, like kind of Disney, quote unquote, inspired stuff. And when I look at some of those movies that I watched when I was young and impressionable, when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, forming my ideologies at that time around marriage and love and relationships. And now I watch those movies, it becomes so clear to me. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. What in the Disney, what kind of conditioning was happening here? And I'm able to actually track back how we got to this place of seeing the money conversation as forward. And when you look at many of the movies of that time, the overarching thing, many, if not almost all of the movies, it's either love or money. You either choose, and this was even in Bollywood, you either choose the solid, responsible man who will take care of you, or you choose the man who makes you laugh and he makes your heart sing, but he's broke. And very often in these
Yeah.
movies, in these, cultural narratives, it was seen that the woman was somehow more sincere if she chose the man. And there's a popular trend on TikTok now. I don't know if you come across it, where it says, I love your daughter. And then the father goes, okay, what do you have to offer her? And the guy says, nothing, only this. And he does some stupid dance. And everybody's doing this trend. And I'm like, that sums it up. That sums it up, Swano.
Yeah. No, subhanallah. You're right. It was either passion or safety.
Yeah. But it
You
couldn't.
can't have passion and safety. You could, yes, you're right. You couldn't have both. Like you could have the chemistry and the thing, but it was a struggle, or you could have the solid, safe,
Yeah.
you know,
And they painted that as
whatever.
boring. They painted the
Yeah,
solid
yeah.
safety as boring, and the other one is passion, but like there's no certainty here. And the underlying message that was it was like it was thrown in our faces, it was shoved in our faces that if you truly love them, money won't matter. There was even an 80s movie for love or for money. It was all over. Yeah, yeah, it was a very famous movie. It was a very famous movie. I can't remember all the actors, but it was very famous. And it was shoved in our faces that if love matters to you, if you're a heartfelt person, if you're a heartfelt woman, especially, because it was always the woman's choice to choose love or money, then money won't matter. As if providership and love are mutually exclusive. That is how it was presented to us. And this still runs in our consciousness and through our filters when we're having these samosa runs. So we're doing something within a chaperoned environment according to, Islamic principles, but that Western notion is running through us. And the thing is that when you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it, according to Islam, providership and love are intertwined. They are interwoven.
It's so interesting. I love that you're saying this because actually, even the hadiths about what to look for in marriage, one of the things is, it's not like if beauty, status, is money. I think status, I can't remember the thing, and piety, right? And you're allowed to choose for all those things. So really, you're bringing up money and bringing up whether you two are compatible money-wise is something, you're right, that should happen in the beginning. And I think that's a really interesting thing because Islamically as well, like when you look, um, the fact that status is mentioned shows you like how really like people's socio-economic backgrounds matter. Because if, a girl comes from like a super rich family and the boy doesn't, and it can work. Nobody's saying that it can't work. But the truth is she's used to a certain lifestyle. And it's different. Like if you're asking somebody, can you provide this for me? And I always look at it as and I've seen this because I always in various marriages, you have to look at it as also a bit of potential, right? If you see somebody who is like not so much here, but I know I have a lot of family in America, and in America they get a lot of people get married quite young, like in universities itself or just out of university. And so you'll have like a medical student getting married and things like that, or somebody who's just starting out their second their post-grad degree, you know, and they're getting married. And I look at it as like earning potential as well. Is somebody willing to grow? Even if they don't have the money now, are they somebody who have shown that they're hardworking, that they're willing to expand, that they're willing to
Yeah.
grow? I
Yeah.
mean,
And this is the
they
ideas
don't
about
really have
providership,
to.
right? This is the idea
Yeah.
about providership. Because somebody, people will commonly bring this up, say, okay, but Zaida, you're saying that the man needs to be a provider and we need to, but didn't you know that when Rasulullah married Khadija radiallahu anha, he didn't have money and he didn't have all of that. And to that, I will say, true, but let's look at the full context of the situation. Khadija radiallahu anha was a woman who was experienced. She knew the world. At 40 years old, she knew the world. She had been through things. She was a business owner, mashallah. She didn't just say, oh, Rasulullah, like, he looks great. She actually put him through, I wouldn't say a test, but she got him, she asked for him to do some business on her behalf. And then she sent her servant, she sent her employee to go and keep an eye on him. And then when the employee came back, the employee reported, man, this guy, he is something else. You should see his honesty. You should see the way people respond to him. You should see the way he deals with people. You should see how fair and just he was. And you should see, doing all of that, how he doubled our profits. This man is something. And based on that, she then proposed marriage to him, because this was not, because a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, this and that. But Rasulullah was not a guy who just didn't have any oomph in him and was playing video games all day and said, well, money doesn't really matter in a marriage. No, he had drive. He had Qawwam. He showed himself to have initiative. When he was given that opportunity to go out there and do business, he did it. He took that opportunity. He made the best of it. He didn't just say, no, I'm just going to like chill out. And that, I think, is the defining thing here, is that Rasulullah showed those elements of Qawwam. He may not have, due to his life circumstances, he didn't have the actual tangible assets to offer her. But what he offered her in terms of character and the Qawwam that he displayed showed her that this guy will make it happen. Like we can figure this out. And I want to take everyone back to, you mentioned the root word of Qawwam, the maintainer. And you're absolutely right. It's about to be standing like a pillar, to be upright. And it's a word that implies taking consistent, active stance, being steadfast, and being committed to supporting someone or something. So when Allah uses this word to describe men's roles in relation to women, he's describing men as those who are responsible for standing firm in their duties, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, and morally, which brings me to another part, Mona, and I'd love to hear your take on this as well, which is a man who doesn't have that feeling and that drive of, hey, it's my responsibility to provide for this family, to put a roof over their heads, to make sure that we are on the same page about these things. Like, I need to offer that masculine stability and that container for my wife and for my children. That man is, and look, it's a generalization, but also it's a good preview of the kind of laid back approach. If he doesn't have that, he's going to have that. If he has a laid back approach to finances, he's also going to have a laid back approach to, parenting, and like when the kids have an issue and like, because, we spoke about the Pharaonic leadership, which is one side of the extreme, but the other side of the extreme, which again, Hollywood, Bollywood, and Disney has pushed onto us, is the laid back man. Yeah, he doesn't have a temper, but he also doesn't have any drive, and he kind of tries, and he doesn't try, and then he's sort of like, oh, whatever, and I'll make you laugh a bit and whatever. And there's no solidity and stability to him, in the sense that he doesn't understand the role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. He doesn't understand what Qawwam means. He doesn't understand how important it is for him to be that solid masculine presence in his wife's life, in his children's life. So what's your take on that?
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because even as you were speaking, I was actually thinking about like an ummah, a community is based on, imagine it as a building, right? And each family unit, so it's like bricks. And if the man himself is not leading, and this is why sometimes I look at the Muslim Ummah and I'm like, right, such a state of disrepair, is because in a family structure setting, the men are not being leaders. And so there aren't enough men in the community then being leaders, right? And I mean, you can go, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but over here, like, whether it's like different courses run by different groups, you can go to any of these courses and there will be like 20, 30 rows of women, and there'll be like 2, 3 rows of brothers. Like, and that's not saying that, the women are better than the brothers, nothing like that. But, and what it is saying is, just from a glance point of view, we are having a problem with men sort of leading even on a religious front. If you see the halakas, who runs the madrasas? Like over here, like the madrasa I work in, it's majority until the boys become like, the age of puberty, it's all females. It's all female teachers. It's all, it's all run by females here. And it's one of those things where I think for women especially, the way I, and I know you and I have had this conversation, the way we lean more into our feminine is when there's a stronger masculine man. Like, and when we say that, we're not talking about like, oh, like a big macho kind of man. We're talking about somebody who is comfortable in himself. And we've spoken about this before as well, about how true Qawwam and men with true masculinity, they aren't threatened by these conversations. They aren't threatened by conversations of money. They aren't threatened by having conversations where somebody goes, hey, my needs aren't being met. They're like, okay, they might not love it, but they might be like, okay, like let's have a conversation about it. They're not going to immediately, cut you off and things like that. And I just look at how, like, just the ummah at large, I think if we don't have these solid structures where more families being, again, and even the women, right? Like, I wouldn't be able to do what I did if I didn't have my husband's that support, where I knew he was gonna, you know, like even writing and stuff. If I knew he wasn't gonna provide all of that, I'd just be stressing about other things. I wouldn't be able to sit and write and do the things that I do in the community or whatever. But um, I really think that the way things are going, it is affecting an ummah at large, because what's happening is now we've become, I feel like everybody's also become very, very like nuclear, where, you know, the way, like you said, the whole laid back, the guy who's just laid back and worried about his little family, he'll go to work, he'll come back, he'll do that kind of thing. Um, and they're good men. We're not saying anything, we're not saying, but also we cannot be a community of just little nuclear pockets, living in our little silos, basically. We have to come together and create an ummah. And for that, I know like a lot of women are doing it. We need men to lead as well. We need men to, create that drive. We need more men to come forth. And really, I think as women, we enjoy. Have you seen those memes like "lead me, but when I want to be led"?
But I think a true
Have you
Qawwam,
seen
but
that?
I think a true Qawwam, and it's on both ends, right? So the woman also has to develop her emotional
Yeah,
intelligence and things like that. But a true Qawwam,
100%.
Rasul Sallallahu is the archetype for that. He is the blueprint for that, right? And we're just striving. And sometimes men will say, "Oh, but I can't be like him." Nobody said you must be like him, but he is the prototype. So you kind of have to follow in those footsteps. That's exactly what following the Sunnah means, right? You can't just say, "Oh, I'll never get there." You have to try, right? And he was the archetype of Qawwam, and he was the archetype of, he knew how to handle people. Like the way he dealt with Khadija radiallahu anha versus Aisha Bilana versus Saudar, it was different. He customized his approach, and you see this with his approach with the Sahaba as well, not just his wives, but with the Sahaba. So Qawwam means, again, you said, like women say, lead me, whatever. Yes, because the feminine, and I've spoken about this in our programs and things, the feminine is inconsistent. And what I mean by inconsistent is not that we are, insubstantial, but we have more ebbs and flows. The feminine has a 28-day hormonal cycle. The masculine has a 24-hour hormonal cycle. So the way that we are week to week changes. We're the same person, but also we go through different things. Like I was telling my husband the other day, I said, even after all these years, I'm not sure if you entirely understand how those days before my period, how I have to practice my emotional regulation extra. I have to lean on those tools extra. It's harder, and I recognize that, and I can feel it. And once that time passes, subhanAllah, just like, oh, the weight came off, alhamdulillah, like the whole thing, like I'm chill again.
Like two different people.
And this is the feminine. When the feminine goes through pregnancy and the ups and downs of that, childbirth, the ups and downs of that postpartum, the ups and downs, all of those things, she needs a solid masculine. She needs a container. She needs something that Qawwam, the structure, the solidity. And the thing about Qawwam is that it's not a badge of superiority, it's a badge of responsibility. And that responsibility lies not to your wife, not to your children, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like you will be, like you can decide as a man that you don't want to be a provider, that you don't want to financially provide for your family. You can do that, but it's Allah that you will be answerable to, right? It's Allah. And, Qawwam also suggests not a one-time or occasional responsibility. It's a continuous ongoing role. A pillar doesn't say, well, today I don't feel like being a pillar. I'm just going to sit this one out. And, the pillar stays there. It stays there. You don't get to say, I did my part, I'm done. You're supposed to keep showing up, keep providing, keep protecting consistently and reliably, and with a kind of a balance in your emotional intelligence of knowing when to be firmer and knowing when to be softer. And we don't have a better example of this than in the example of Rasulullah. If you study his life and you look at specific examples of how he dealt with different situations with such a, I can't even call it emotional intelligence. I feel like it falls into a realm of its own because it's such a peak of emotional intelligence. But this is the example. And as I'm saying all of this, women and men might be listening to this and going, oh my God, Zaahida, there's so much that's expected of us. Well, yes, it is a very big role. Being a husband is a very big role. It's a very big responsibility to fulfill. Yes, wives also have a responsibility. And we could have a conversation about that another day, but here we're talking about what should a sister be looking for in a partner. But I also think in our community, there's a lot of emphasis placed on letting women know what their roles are in marriage and preparing them for it from a very young age. And I'm speaking from not just personal experience, but having dealt with thousands of women over the years. Women from a very young age are primed to be wives and mothers, and it's instilled in them. And the boys are just like, come at 2 a.m. and play video games all day. And that Qawwam is not instilled. The way we treat boys in our society is not setting them up to be Qawwam, because we've created such a soft life for the boys and such a lack of responsibility and babied them so much. And then you're looking for a wife who will continue to baby this man and offer him a soft life. And the men are going, subhanAllah, the men are going into the feminine era. And this is really like, when you look at the Jali concept, it's the inversion of everything. And what you're seeing in our society is women who are going into their masculine, men who are going into their feminine. The roles are inverted in the marriage, if the man is not stepping up as a Qawwam, the woman can't stand to see her family sink. So she has to step into her masculine. She doesn't want to be a macho. You've seen it in the programs, and I see it every day. Women are crying. They're like, I don't want to be this masculine anymore. I don't want to do this, but I have to, because I can't see my family sink, and my husband's not stepping up up to the plate. So what am I supposed to do? And then you don't feel, as a woman, when you're in your masculine, you don't feel attracted to that man. You feel like his mother. You don't feel like his partner. And so then the chemistry fades, and he says, you're not attending to my physical needs. And she's like, bro, I don't feel attracted to you because I'm the man in this relationship, So everything becomes inverted. And the whole fabric of the family, because if Shaitan can break down the fabric of the marriage, then he breaks down the fabric of the family, and then he breaks down the fabric of the society and the community and the ummah.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I think also, like, you were mentioning about how these women feel like their mothers. There's just so much resentment that builds up, right? And once resentment sets in, like, that's poison. Resentment is really, really poisonous. And I think that's something that um women need to be aware of in their search for husbands. Like, one of the things that I did, I remember one of my friends saying, like, what are you doing? Like, you're doing the parents' work. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, this list of questions you have. Because, like, and it wasn't just questions, like, it was things that were important to me. And I think that's something that we have to ask ourselves, like, what's important to us, right? For me, and there's a very
Can you
random
share your
example, but
questions, Mona? I would love if you could share some of your questions.
I, it was a long time ago, but I'll tell you one of the big ones was and this was fairly early on, and it was a money related question actually, where I as a family we don't deal with interest. And that was something because, there are various people who do various things. And so I just very politely, you don't have to be like, hey, do you do interest? Like, I was just like, look, my family and I, we don't deal with interest, whether that's for houses, whatever it is, like, what are your viewpoints on this, right? Like, and, my husband then, like we were on the same page, but that is something that's huge because if you're going to get married to somebody and you haven't asked them about interest and then you get married and, like look, finances form part of everyday life, whether it's your electricity bills, whether it's your home, whether it's your food, whether it's your children's activities and schooling. Like, it's so foolish for us not to bring it up, right? Like, we have to bring it up because it forms, and in fact, I can't remember where I read this. This was a long time ago. One of the biggest points of contention in marriages is finance, right? And
It's
it's a huge
one of
point.
the top two things that couples fight about is money. Money conflict is huge, and it touches every, like you said, it touches every part of your life, and especially the more responsibility and the more children and stuff that you have, the more money becomes an issue because you're dealing with that. Like you're saying, you cannot go a day in the world that we live in without interacting with money in some form. You're paying for
Yeah,
something
correct.
virtually every single day. So how
And
could
it's very, people also have very different views of money, right? If you are somebody who saves and you get married to somebody who's like, oh, like, I'm just gonna spend, I want to travel the world, which is great, but then you're going to really struggle in that if somebody's like, I want to just travel the world and do this, and I'm not worried about saving, I'll save when I get older. There's a real conflict of interest. And I think something that you mentioned in the beginning, which was, what we've been thrown about love and everything. Love can't solve everything. You and I know this. It cannot solve
there's
all
something
problems.
that he mentioned in that lecture as well, which I 100% agree on, is that we've become an ummah of feelings, and that's because of the Western notions, right? And that might be strange coming from me because I'm all about emotional intelligence and all of that, but that's different to feelings. And the thing is, this notion that we have that it's somehow morally superior and more sincere if you're doing everything for love. I love you and I love you and the money doesn't matter and I love you. And I've actually seen it. Mona, I've seen in TikTok comment sections, young women saying things like, oh, I said it's okay even if he doesn't provide. All I want is for us to be together for Muslim girls. And I'm like, subhanallah, because that feeling, that feeling of like, I just want you, it's gonna go away very quickly when you have a baby to provide for, when you're pregnant, when you don't know how to provide for your baby, that feeling goes away. And if a man is depending on that feeling to provide for you, then you are at the mercy of that man's ebb and flow of his feelings, just like a Firaun. With someone like a
Mm.
Firaun, if he felt good about you, yay, he was great to you. And if he didn't like what you say, sorry for you. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. A man who's a Qawwam understands his responsibilities according to what Allah has commanded for him. So whether he is head over heels in love with you in that moment, or you and him are not hitting it up, you're not seeing it eye to eye, he will not budge on his responsibility because he understands the one who he is going to be accountable to rather.
Yes, it's so interesting that you say that because it's something that I refer to in my head as sort of main character. Like I call it the X show, like insert whoever's name, Muhammad, Abdi, whatever, that person's show. Like where when you were talking about these ebbs and flows, if they feel a certain way, then it goes a certain way. If they don't feel a certain way, then it doesn't go. Do you know what I mean? And I think when you have families, when you have a real relationship, it can't run. It's not a, there are no side characters, right? It's not like this is my show and these are all side characters because what you do impacts the people around you. Um, subhanallah, uh, this is something that I feel very, very strongly about because when you were talking even about, saying on TikTok or whatever, like it's okay. Even mahar, people be like, oh, just memorize a surah for me. And I'm like, do you know what the
God,
purpose
like,
of your
okay,
mahar
wait, wait,
is?
wait,
Do
I'm
you
so
know
glad
what
you
the
brought this
purpose of
up,
it is?
Mona, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the conversation of money for marriage necessary by implementing mahar.
Yeah.
Like he has made it necessary. And look, like we can't blame Disney and pop culture for everything. I also want to bring in um, women sisters who have grown up in homes where the father was not a provider, and how that was then
Yeah.
normalized through their neurology, through their neural system, through their nervous system. They saw their mother's hustle, they saw their mother's struggle, right? And look, I am not saying like in marriage you'll be go up through ups and downs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he will test you. He will test you, and sometimes he may test you through money. So in a marriage, you may experience financial ups and downs. Are we saying that you as the woman should say, excuse me, you are not being qawwam, I'm out of here, you're not providing me? That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that yes, you'll go through those things and you will see it through, but this understanding that this man have that form of akhlaq? Does he have that qawwam built into it? That you still have the safety and solidity of him, even if you go through financial ups and downs. Is he still there for you? Is he still present? Is he still making an effort? Is he still striving? That's the difference, as opposed to just saying, well, I guess that's it now. I've come to the end of that type of thing. So we see I've seen a lot of this happen where sisters have grown up in homes where their mothers were constantly hustling, their mothers were constantly in their masculine. The fathers were kind of this laid back man, like this poor me, and they connected to their fathers and loved their fathers, and I idolized and romanticized their fathers, like nobody's a good man, and the mother goes, and then there's like all this kind of thing. And I recently had a client say to me, she says that growing up, we never had a problem asking our mother for money for something, but whenever we had to ask our father, we felt incredibly guilty. Tell me that that's not an inversion of roles. And now, surprise, surprise, the same client has a major problem with, like, she's in her masculine, she's earning the money. And that doesn't mean that every woman who earns money is in their masculine, but she's like really afraid to have these conversations and finding like that the guys are bringing up this gold digger thing because it's a reflection of what she went through growing up. So Mona, I'm not sure if there's something you want to share on that, but I think this is a very important thing to touch on. If you are a sister who's seeking marriage, or maybe you are going, you're divorced and you're thinking, in my next marriage, I want things to be different. I think these are really important questions to ask yourself. How did your father provide or not provide in the home growing up? What was normalized for you? Was it normalized that men are not providers, that are not qawwam? And how is that influencing your perception of this? Is that one of the filters that's causing you to find it very awkward to have this conversation? How do I bring it up? And I feel so guilty and I don't know. And then even if my husband, and I've seen this as well with clients, husbands who are good qawwam, good providers, and because their wives grew up in environments where men were not that, their wives experience a lot of conflict, a lot of cognitive dissonance of like, I feel so bad. I'm just using all his money and I shouldn't be using his money. And he's like, bro, like, I'm the provider. What are you talking about?
Mm.
And she's saying, I don't know. I feel so guilty for using his money. And and it's frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for him as the man as well, because he's like, why are you making this an issue? Like, I'm providing and Allah is
Mm.
providing, and I'm getting the reward. Because I think another very important thing culturally that we have forgotten is that providership for a man, how much and how little, that is something that you need to have a conversation about, and you need to figure out what's reasonable. And that's why those expectations need to be set. But providership is a fard on men. And when a man fulfills that fard obligation, he earns a reward. And when he does not, he is answerable to Allah for that. And we forget that sometimes. Because if you as a woman are going, oh, I don't think, we can just have love. I can live on love and fresh air. It doesn't need to provide. Girl, it's not about you. It's not about whether you can live on fresh air. This man is going to be answerable. You do not want him not providing to be the reason he ends up in Jahannam. If you truly love this man, you'll want him to be in Jannah. And that comes down to the underlying principle of why are we getting married? We're looking at these. Look, and you're talking to someone who loves romance. I love romance, right?
Yeah.
But again, we grew up on these things of like, romance means you don't have any needs and it's just about the person and it's just about the love. We need to know that romance is tied in with stability. You and I both know, being married, you've been married 12 years, mashallah. May Allah give you many more happy years. And I've been married 18, mashallah. You and I both know that once your marriage has matured, or even actually earlier than that, but especially when your marriage has matured and there's a lot of responsibility and children, the romance comes from the stability when you have a man who is a qawwam, right? It's not as simple as pay my bills and then I feel romantic. No, when he is a true qawwam, when he is there for you, when you're working on your deen together, when you're helping each other out, when you're emotionally there for each other, when he's that solidity in your life, when he's that safe space for you, the romance flows, the attraction flows, the chemistry just keeps on reproducing itself. But when you have a man who you feel abandoned by, who says, oh, I love you, but like, there's no evidence of this love because love is a verb. There's no evidence in the stability. He's like, oh, love you, babe. And then like, I'm on my bed, I'm not there. And I'm like, oh, you have a problem. Oh, shame, sort it out. And then gone. The attraction fizzles, the romance, it doesn't matter then if he says nice things to you, you don't have the solid structure around it to support romance to blossom.
I think what you're saying, it's resonating so much with me. And what comes up for me is that love is a choice. And we've heard this, but like for me, it's that you're choosing like the commitment every day. And it's a choice we make every day, right? To show up every day. And that sounds tiring. And even when we're talking about men, one of the things that we're not saying that men can never have an off day and they can never have, that's not at all, I don't think, what either of us are trying to say, because they're human beings. People go through your mental health difficulties, people have ups and downs in life. We're talking about the overarching, person, like, not one off here and there, or not even like, when they're going through a bad period in their life. Um, and, we were talking about this in the beginning where, um, we're saying this about men with love, but really what we're saying is to the sisters who are choosing. We're not even talking about men, we're not bad mouthing men, we're talking about, as sisters looking to get married, like, what choices do you need to look at? And I think a lot of things that, for me anyway, one of the big things was, do I know what I'm looking for? in, realistically, do I know what I'm looking for?
Okay, but Mona,
Um,
I love what you're saying, and I'm gonna add in here that many of these sisters, especially if she grew up in a family where the father was not a provider, but even outside of that, let's just say the father was a provider. Overall, I hear from sisters that their families will say, "Why are you being so fussy? Why are you being so fussy? Um, like, why are you making money
I
such a
think
big
though
deal? Like, just live a simple life. Live a simple life according to the Sunnah, and everything will be fine." And before I let you answer, Mona, something I have to say is that love is a verb. Love is a
yeah,
verb, right? It's not just promises, it is a verb. You see love in action. And also that think about it, right? You don't know what life holds. And something that you see a lot, I've seen this a lot in the Western community, and it's actually very widely known. There's actually statistics on this of women who, when they become sick, if they get cancer or some other kind of sickness, the it's staggering the percentage of men after 10, 15, 20, 30 years of marriage will abandon them. In fact, it said that in many of the US clinics, when a woman is diagnosed with cancer, the staff will let her know, like, this is the reality that they've seen happen to so many women, that the man just is gone. He leaves her, right? And this is why this concept of Qawwam is so important. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the best of health and prosperity and goodness and afiyah. But at the same time, what if you do? And I've seen this in our community as well. What if, God forbid, you get sick, or you have a child who's very sick, but what if you get sick and you can't baby this man anymore, right? What if you get sick? Is he a qawwam? Is he going to stand by you? Is he going to be there? Or he's just going to say, bye, she can't take care of my needs, so I'm going to go get someone else. She can't like it's all about me. It's what about me? Because that's how, like I say, in this Desi community, we've raised the men to be like babies. Like it's all about them and getting their needs fulfilled. And a woman needs to fulfill this role and make food for you and do this for you and do that for you. And if when you can't be that, when you can't fulfill that particular definition of what it means to be a wife, is this man going to stick it out? Is he going to be a qawwam? And yes,
yeah.
at the same time, the sisters have to ask, will you stand by the man? And in our community, we've seen, yes, the women do stand by the men, generally speaking.
No,
Statistic.
no, not so much planned by the men. I think it's one of those questions where, when I was talking about it, I was more referring to, do we do we know what we ourselves, and I
But
know this
this
as a
brings
younger
me to
person,
the
there's a lot
question,
of
Mona.
words.
This brings me to the question is you have their families telling them they're asking for too much. You have their families telling them that money shouldn't be a big deal. What would you say to sisters like that? What would you say? What parts of their family's advice should they override? What kind of questions should they be asking in these meetings? What should they be looking for in a marriage? When I say should they, yes, everyone's values are a bit different, but ultimately, as believers, why are you getting married as a believer? You're getting married, and people say, oh, fulfill half my iman. So what does that mean? And I often say, when you get your nikah certificate, you don't say, okay, there's your 50% portion of your iman. You're done. Tick. That's not what happens. You earn that 50% through how you treat each other. You earn that 50% of how
Yeah.
you move through that marriage. So why are we getting married? Why are we getting married? And we have to think of it, the ultimate purpose from the Western notion that we've been fed with, and even that Bollywood notion, it's we get married for romance, for love. And yes, we do get married for love. We all want that love and romance and intimacy. But as believers, it's so much more than that. We get married to be partners to each other for Jannah, partners for each other in our Iman, being people who will like kind of egg each other on towards good deeds, towards good actions, towards uprightness, towards living out our dini values. And if the
Yeah.
man is not a qawwam, how is he going to do that? Because he can say, oh, I'll read my, he may read his salah sometimes, it's about what's in my heart. Or maybe he is
Yeah.
5 times salah. Maybe he does read 5 times salah, but like, whatever, this, that, it's no big deal. Do you get what I'm saying? And then when he's on the other side of the extreme of the Fir'aunic, he's like, yeah, this, that, boom, 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 everything like black and white, right? So understand that when you're choosing a man, you are choosing a partner to walk with you as you both strive for Jannah. Is this a man who will strive with me towards Jannah? Does he have the emotional intelligence? Does he have the resilience? Does he have that qawwam?
And I think so there's something that you mentioned. One is about um, how do these sisters deal with their so what their families are saying. You know, in my own family, my extended family, and there are people who aren't married. There are girls who aren't married who've had, they just haven't. It's not that they haven't tried. They've tried, and they just haven't met somebody, and they're not fussy. I genuinely mean this. But again, the people who are coming, or the men are, people who not interested in working, all of this, and I think as sisters also there's something that we need to do is if we love ourselves, and this is a big part of it, and family pressure is immense and I understand that, but we also have to look at it as this is going to be the rest of my life, and we have to love ourselves enough, I think, to not give into the family pressure. We have to raise ourselves, and as people now, like millennials, we have to make sure that do the work to not do that to our own daughters. Where we pressurize them or make them feel a certain way. I remember people saying to me, there was somebody who didn't pray, and they were like, "It's okay, you can influence him." I'm like, "Listen, I'm not interested in changing anybody's heart. If he, only Allah is the turner of hearts. I am not the turner of hearts, right? Allah is al-muqallib al-qulub." It's
Mona,
not me. I'm not going.
this is the, I'm so glad you brought that piece up, and this is so critical, is that if he won't do something for Allah, why is he going to do it for you?
Yeah,
And it's the
100%.
same with
He's not.
providership. It's the same with anything. If that man doesn't feel accountable to Allah, who are you? Once the chemistry fades off, who are you? If Allah is not
Yes.
important
Yeah.
enough, who are you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true because we, the way women, Allah has created us, we're really we're emotionally inclined, and we think about, like, all love and all of this. But I remember this sister going to a sheikh and saying, "But he had a fajr beard," and the sheikh was like, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "It looked like he prayed fajr." And he's like, "Did you ask him?" Like, but he doesn't pray Fajr. And you're just like, okay. And these are questions, you're talking about what's important to us. First of all, like for us, like, because the sisters, honestly, when I look around, I see sisters who are working on the deen, who are working on themselves. They're doing so much inner work. They're working, they're studying hard. They're doing well. And then when it comes to marriage, like, it's as if all of this, like, they're not a person. Like, all of those things don't matter to their families and stuff unless they're married. And I completely reject that notion. Like, you can completely be somebody who is, you can be single and a whole person. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get married. Like, we were built to live in community, but if you don't find the right person, I think, or somebody, and again, not being fussy. I'm not talking about being fussy because I know some sisters can be fussy as well. They're like, I don't know. I always dreamed that he would have this and that, and he would look a certain way. And as sisters, we
Can
also,
we
we
redefine
need to,
fussy? Can we redefine fussy? Because I think there are areas that
yeah.
you absolutely should be
Okay.
fussy in,
No, no.
and areas that don't
Yeah.
really matter, but you're being fussy in. So I think that's a good distinction to make here, because I say
Yeah.
be fussy. This is the person. Yeah. And as someone who has been
100%. When I say,
as someone who has been had difficult pregnancies, subhanallah, and postpartums, and I had, an illness and like all these complications, I will tell you, there's no time that I felt more vulnerable than those times. And
yeah.
you want to know that you have someone solid next to you to support you through all of that. Because you and I both know it gets messy. Like, physically, it gets messy to have a baby. Like, all of it gets messy, right? And they're gonna see you through some very vulnerable times, and vice versa, and it goes both ways. But what are the you need to get clear as a sister, what are the areas you should be fussy in, and the areas maybe don't be so fussy in. So if you were really fussy that he needed to be a certain height, but he fulfills all the other requirements and he's a great Qawwam, it's let the height thing go a little bit, right? Because the height thing is not going to make a huge difference to the quality of your day-to-day life, unless you really think it is, but it's probably not, right? But, or you said it has to have like green eyes or something, subhanAllah. That's not gonna make a
Yeah.
difference. Trust me, if that man is not Qawwam and he has green eyes, you're gonna end up hating those green eyes, right? So it doesn't matter so much in the long term.
Yeah.
But you do need to
But
have, because,
character-wise, yeah,
sorry.
I think no, sorry, you broke up for a minute, so I started talking. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, no,
I
I'm
didn't
just
mean to
saying that
interrupt. Sorry.
physically he has to be appealing to you. I mean, you
Yeah,
have to like the look of his face. You shouldn't be completely turned off on it. But these
yeah,
little things, so get clear. What are the areas I should be fussy on? I should be fussy.
yeah.
Like like I couldn't believe it. I've heard a sister say when it was taking her longer. Now she is married, but it was taking her like a while. She got married, quote unquote, later. I mean, she got married, I think 23, 24, which is not really late, but the family was like, oh. And one of the things that the elderly auntie said to her is take your hijab off. Take your hijab off because
Mm.
you're coming across like old and frumpy with the hijab. After you get married, you can put it back on. And I was just like, what? What? Because what you're doing is then who are you attracting? What kind of partner you're attracting? If you're saying I need to take that off, you're saying it's a man who, like, you have to be something other than who you are. You have to show something about your relationship with Allah that's not true. You're not truly saying what your values are. You're not standing on business about that. So then you and thankfully she didn't listen to the advice. She kept her hijab on, and then she obviously attracted a partner who staying on their deen together was important because it was important for her. And then she wanted
Yeah.
a partner who that kind of stuff was important for too. And had she listened and said, and so I think culturally, and Mona, you can tell me what you think about this culturally, we've made being married, the status of being married, more important than the actual purpose that marriage is meant to fulfill according to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to say that again. Culturally, we said, get married at any cost, even if it's the cost of your deen.
Yeah. No, we have. And it's so interesting you say that because I have literally heard people say, just anyone will do that. Catch you on the street. Like, you're just like, oh, do you value me as a woman so little that just anyone will
The
do,
children you're going
right?
to. What about the children? What about the children? Because if this man is not Qawwam, what kind of father is he going to be
Going to
for
be.
children?
Yeah.
Are you okay with your children not having a father who is present, a father who understands it through, a father who is teaching them the deen? Are you okay with
Yeah.
that?
And I think one of the things, you were talking about, like, in terms of we've made marriage the sort of the be all and end all. Look, I don't want to disrespect our elders. A lot of it, I think, comes from a place of fear
Yeah.
because of the way that they grew up in, where
And the
marriage
famous
was,
one you
you
hear
know,
is take what you can get because there's more women than men. So just take what you can get. And that again,
scarcity mindset, 100%. The scarcity mindset. Like, I remember when the first cousin got engaged, and we have a lot of girls in our family, like the first one. And I remember the mothers, it was like suddenly you're just like, what is happening? Like, all of y'all were completely sane a minute ago. Like, what is happening? And all of a sudden there was this kind of like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And alhamdulillah, they settled down and everything. But there's definitely this thing that happens with like, all the good guys are going to get taken and all the guys are going to get taken. And the truth is the person that Allah has written for you is the person that Allah has written for you. And one of the things that even I say to myself is if Allah is keeping something away from you, and sometimes you also have situations where women, really want one person, right? And they're like, just this guy, doesn't matter anything, like even if he's not praying, he's not this, and this is the person. If Allah is keeping something away from you, like also look at it sometimes as a form of protection. We always look at it as like, oh my, like I remember this once I was on a course and it was one of this, I think Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif, rahimahullah, he used to do the dua courses. She's like, no, I only want to marry this one brother, this one. And he's like, no, just make dua for like,
then,
like a
yeah.
person with these qualities, right? But she was like, no, I only want to marry this one person. And sometimes you have to be like, look, you don't know whether Allah is protecting you from something. Like, don't be so like, this is it. Everybody else, eyes shut. And I think, look, for me, when I think about approaching marriage, I talk to this because a lot of my cousins and we're close and we have kids of a similar age group. Like, what do we, what questions would you ask? Like we say, what questions? Like, I feel like there needs to be some kind of like, I don't know, like a
Right.
like an event where they do like,
You mentioned a
relay.
few. You mentioned a few, Mona. You said, what is your
Yeah,
definition of leadership?
yeah,
What does being a leader mean to you? I would add in here, how does your definition of a leadership allow for difference of opinion? How do you handle
yeah,
opinion? How do you handle conflict? Um, what are your expectations of me? What are your expectations of a wife? What are your
right,
expectations of a wife financially, if any?
yeah,
How do you see money in a marriage? Um,
yeah,
what are your what are your ideals about how money should be managed? What do you think about saving? What do you think about investing? What do you think about spending? And here I would also say when they are answering, um, have follow-on questions in the sense that sometimes people give very like sort of like
one word answers.
not even just one word answers, but very generic type of answers where they would say, no, as long as you're not overspending and not too much luxuries. And I would say question, so what would you deem as overspending?
Yeah.
What do you
And what is
consider
a
luxury
luxury?
versus a need? Because these are very subjective things. We've explored this in Beshara many things, but these are very, very subjective things. One person's luxury is another person's necessity. And it
Yeah,
really depends on life context. It really depends on where you're at, your financial aspirations, your financial situation, right?
yeah,
So asking questions like this of, what do you consider? Because they may just say, oh, as long as you're not extravagant. And you say, okay, so what is your definition of extravagant? Because some people think extravagant is like buying two croissants instead of one and sharing it. I'm
no,
not joking. I'm not
no,
joking
no, but
about
that's fine. That's fine. But like, if you have the same opinion, you know what I
exactly.
mean?
Like I had a
That's
sister reach
fine as
out to
long
me.
as both of you.
Yeah, I had a sister reach out to me and she says, I was speaking to this brother with regards to marriage, and he kept saying like how expensive things are and how he considers buying nuts like almonds and pecans and macadamia nuts. He considers that a luxury and it's so expensive and no one should have to buy it. And she says to me, should I be worried? I said, well, I don't know. Do you like eating nuts? And if, and if you do, it's gonna be a problem.
Like a side little secret sitting in the car and eating nuts.
And then 20 minutes now, therapist's office, and he's like, she spends on all the nuts. Start with Vina, but anyway, having a bit of fun here. But you know, I mean,
No, no, no. It's
these
true. It's
small
true.
things become a very
Um,
big thing. These small things become a very big thing. Like, ask him, what are the non-negotiables for you with regards to
I was
providing for
just
your
thinking
wife?
that, yeah.
What do you consider a non-negotiable as provision for your wife? And he may say, well, I don't think we need to have our own home. I don't think you need to have this. I know. And then
Mm.
you've got to decide whether you're okay with that. You don't just say, oh no, maybe I'm asking for too much. You really ask yourself, like, can I live like that? Is that something I'm accustomed to? And that's why earlier you mentioned it, and this is actually part of the theme, to match socioeconomic backgrounds when you're getting married. Because if you've got I think it was also in one of these lectures where he mentioned Aladdin. Aladdin really set the stage for, Princess marries this guy from the street, so romantic, so impractical. So
Yes, yes.
impractical.
Mm.
Let's be honest. I'm not saying it can never work. I'm just saying not really you really have to the values will be quite different. What you
Yeah. And
consider
I think one of the things you also have to
oh,
go on, sorry.
go ahead, Mona.
No, one of the things that you have to also look at is the lifestyle you were brought up with, right? Like, if you are used to having had a cleaner your entire life and you've never cleaned, you can't go. That is a question that you should be asking, like, will you be able to provide for me? One of the questions I asked, I'll be honest, was um, when we have children, inshallah, I would like to be a stay-at-home mom. Is that something that, you're okay with? Would you be able to provide for that situation? And, although I am a yes, I'm an author, but, in terms of I do stay at home with my children, I homeschool, this thing. So that was a conversation because that was something that was very, very important to me. Now, I know with one of my other sisters, for instance, she loves traveling. And for her, that was a very important question. Like, are you going to, I like to go and visit different countries in the world. Is that something, that you'd be willing to spend on? And different people, like you have to, those are really, really important questions. The interest question is a huge one because if y'all have two different opinions on whether or not to take interest, if one person says yes and the other person believes like it's a mortal sin, there's going to be a lot of internal, not just fights, but there's going to be a lot of internal angst that's happening, you know. Even questions like, look, I'm somebody who, I like likes to set aside money to give charity. Is that something, you would like to do? Or, do you have any charity projects that you're working on? Any charities that you're interested in? You're just gauging now how this person values things. Is, giving important to them? Some people might give money, other people might give their time, and that's fine, right? Like, but you have to, if giving, being part of the community is important to you. And again, the mahar question is huge. It's a huge question. Like, you cannot, and obviously this comes later on when, people have agreed and everything, but it's, the mahar question is a really important question. The other question is also, what do you expect, like, from my parents in terms of, now I don't know how it is in South Africa and Sri Lanka. It's getting less and less as people are becoming more religiously inclined. And alhamdulillah, my sisters and I haven't done it, and most of our family haven't. But for whatever reason, dowry became a thing where it's not the mahar, but the girl giving. And they don't call it dowry in a lot of cultures, but the girl side gives like a gift to the boy's side, right? Like whether it's a house or a car or something massive. And that was something that brought up where just like, look, we don't believe in that. The only thing Islamic is a mahar. And my dad had all daughters, and my sisters and I were like, we are not cattle to be sold, like, oh, we have highest bidder, ching, but it was one of those are all like important questions to ask. And obviously you have the questions about the deen are important again, like in terms of, we talked about the salah and the zakah. Zakah is a really important one. All of those, because like we said, if somebody is their due diligence in terms of, this is even for us, like I've noticed even my relationship, um, I read this, I don't know if it's a hadith or a saying by an Islamic scholar, and I read it with so much. She's like, every time I say something wrong, I see it in my relationship with my child and the animal that he rides,
Mm.
right? So like it's one of those things where you will see that, and it's I don't know, these conversations are so important and we can't shy away from that. And where this is not a conversation where we're men bashing in any way, shape, or form. Rather, we're saying as women, you know, the men, they need to do their role of Qawwam. And as women, we need to do our due diligence as well, about and ask ourselves what is it that we're looking for. And also really, really be okay with facing a backlash. And it's not easy where when people call you fussy, because there are some families that will pressure you enough that some people just give in. And I've had friends who that's happened to, right? Like they've been pressured enough that they'll just marry and then later they got divorced and all of this. And like, I remember one friend like sitting on her engagement stage just weeping, like she was just crying. And you're just like, oh my God, like is this how you want to start a marriage, subhanAllah? And her parents just really, really like pushed it. Um, and it is one of those things where I think sometimes we also have to be okay with just going, not okay. It's never okay, but we have to love ourselves enough to kind of be like, okay, if you're gonna call me fussy, that's or you're gonna call me names, that's fine. Allah will, Allah will, the right person, Allah will bring them, right? Like I'm not going to settle for just anybody. Um, and again, we talked about, the height thing, and we're not talking about those kind of fussy, but when it comes to character, when it comes to a man being a true leader, all those things matter. They really, really do, for your long-term mental health, for your children. When the thing about families is sometimes we think of it as just a here and now thing, but it's a generational thing because how we bring up our children impacts their children, impacts their children. It has such impacts. We have seen the impacts on us of our parents' upbringings. Do you know what I mean? And um, we have to look at it. I tell my children as well, like one of the reasons to have children is yes, because you have a love for children. But one of the reasons for me anyway is who's going to continue the faith? Are you going to continue Islam? Are you going to continue La ilaha illallah? Like, what is our reason, like you said, for getting married, right? Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to strengthen the ummah. We're trying to build unity. We're trying to, yes, complete half our deen, but we're also, it's not just about us. It's about the group at large as well. And I think where we fall and where we fail in every aspect is when we just turn it to, oh, it's me. And I'm not saying don't think about yourself because some people go to the other extreme and only think about other people. It has to be a balance. But we have to think about ourselves, and we also have to think about how is this going to look like for the future generations. If I have a man who's not a provider, what is my daughter going to do? I want my daughter to go, this is what men are supposed to be like. Do I want my son to be that way, or do I want him to be like a good husband and a brother and a good, uh, yeah, a good human being and a leader in society? Like, subhanallah, I, I don't know. It's not. It's sometimes it can feel overwhelming, and this is where turning back to Allah over and over and over and over again, praying lots of istikhara. And people think istikhara is like just when you're gonna get married. Like pray it all the time. I pray it when I'm making a purchase online, right? Like the dua at least, even if I'm not praying the salah and the dua. But even if your parents say this guy's coming over, make the dua of istikhara, like but or should we invite so and so over? Make the dua of istikhara then. Like make it all the time, just so that like every step of the way is blessed. Like I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are.
So Mona,
But
I think to wrap it up for everyone, because sometimes people might listen to this and say, but Zaahida, we sort of follow yours and Mona's advice, we're never going to get married. And that is in Allah's hands, right? Just remember that is in Allah's hands whether or not you get married. And also, um, really question this norm that we have in our society that your life is incomplete until you are married. Hold on, because this is about you for the time that you are not married, and even after, but especially now, start building your relationship with Allah. Work on your deen, work on your connection with Him, work on your understanding of what it means to be a Muslim woman in the world. And as you do that, inevitably, you will get clearer and clearer on what you should be fussy about for the pleasure of Allah. There are certain things that you need to be fussy about for the pleasure of Allah, for ensuring that you are fulfilling your duties and requirements with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because choosing a spouse is a very big responsibility. When you're choosing a husband and he's not on the deen and he's not a qawwam and he's not all of these things, you're now putting yourself in a very vulnerable situation. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such that a Muslim woman cannot marry a man who's off the book? You can't marry a Christian man, you can't marry a Jewish man, because you won't have the qawwam. You won't have the qawwam in him. You won't have something. It'll be so hard for you with regards to your deen. Um, it'll be so hard for you with regards to your deen. And so you really want to ensure that you're choosing someone for the sake of Allah. You're choosing someone that's going to be a partner with you on the deen, that's going to be a partner with you through life, so that you both can be parents according to the sunnah, because you're both going to be answerable about how you were parents. Both going to be answerable about how you treated each other, how you fulfilled each other's rights. And you want someone who's on the same page with you, in the same chapter, in the same book, literally the same book, the Quran. You're together on that, with that. So you it's very, very hard to negotiate with someone whose value system is so outside of the realm of your own. You can't negotiate with them. You can't negotiate well with someone on these important day-to-day issues when the two of you are following two different books, so to speak. Right? So someone can be Muslim, grow up in a Muslim home, in a Muslim family, and not necessarily have that connection to their deen, and they don't have that understanding of Qawwam. It's going to be really, really hard to live your life in accordance to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so by you not staying married and saying no, I want you guys to understand that when you're building that relationship with Allah and getting clear on your values regarding that, you saying no to the person that you know is not in alignment with that bigger vision for yourself, is an act of ibadah. Putting up with and making sabr with the comments from your family because you know why you're going in this direction is an act of ibadah. And when you say yes to that person, because again, you'll be doing what Mona said, you'll be reading your istikhara, you're going to be connecting to Allah constantly through this. You're going to be growing your own taqwa. You have that understanding within you that Allah will bring the person. And if He doesn't, then that's His wisdom. That's His hikmah, right? But when you say yes to that person, that will be an act, it will be for the sake of Allah as well. That's not to say that you can't be attracted to that person. It's not to say that you can't find that person attractive. It should be both. But can you see it's about you as the woman also zooming out and saying, what's the bigger picture here? If it's all about just get married because you must get married and you're going to get left behind and there's not enough, and all scarcity, then we know the road that goes down. Do you want to go down that road? Are you going down that road for the pleasure of Allah? Or are you going down that road because you just don't want to be seen as being left on the shelf? And remember, actions are in accordance with the intention. So if you're doing it with the intention, I just want to be married because I have to be married and everyone says I have to be married, then that's what you're going to get. And, it's not an easy path to traverse at all. So I think all comes back to the questions that you have. We've given you some examples here, but as you're working on your connection with Allah and becoming clearer on who you are as a Khalifa in this world, what purpose Allah has given you, it's going to become clearer and clearer who you should be, who you should be looking for, what you should be seeking in a husband. And really, by the end of this episode, it's becoming to a place where if somebody says, "Are you a gold digger?" You're just like, "What? Okay, pass." It's like I can't even like respond to that. That's just so outside of the realm because we're not working from the same book. We're not working from the same book because so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant everyone good spouses. May He grant them goodness in their marriage. If you are listening to this as someone who is married and you're like, dang, I wish I had heard this many years ago, may Allah grant you ease. Ask Allah to change your heart and change the heart of your husband and make him a qawwam. Allah is in charge of him. If you are already married and you're saying, but my husband's not a qawwam, you have decisions in front of you. If you feel like you need to reassess the marriage, you got to seek the help for that. But also ask Allah first to change his heart, to make him a qawwam, to make him to change what is in him, right? Anything you want to add to that, Mona?
No, really, I think you've covered it all, and it just goes back again, dua, 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 like lots of dua, lots of do the work on yourself. I think that if I could go back to
Sorry
myself,
because
my
I almost
younger self,
forgot this
that's what I
part.
would say.
If you grew up in a family where your father was not a qawwam, your father was not a provider, ask Allah to heal you and do some healing work around that.
Well,
Heal some
yeah.
of that trauma so that when you are approaching marriage, you're letting go of that filter. Sorry, Mona, go ahead with that.
No, correct. It's just, yeah, anything that you have, that you're stuck on, things like that. I would say to my younger self, like, do the work on those things. because what those things actually will rear their heads in marriage. Like we think, well, oh yeah, we're getting married. Those things, that we're stuck on before marriage, it really comes out in a big way because, like you said, kids crying in the night, this and that, like sleep deprived, all of this, those things come out in a bigger way. Um, Lots of dua, um, give a lot of sadaqah, give a lot of charity, just keep asking Allah and really try. If I could go back to my younger self, I would also say, don't let this be the focus. Like you do you, like go out there, really, really do your own thing, in terms of find who you are, be the best person that you can be. And inshallah, like everything will just, things will have a way, subhanAllah, in life of working out. Nothing works out, um, 100% for any of us, right? And everybody has their trials and difficulties, but life, subhanAllah, has a way of working out where when you often look back, you think, oh my God, Allah saved me from that, or Allah protected me from something. Um, and really have that trust that Allah has got your back. And I think when we look at it in that way, that Allah has got my back, it really it's such a comfort because even if nobody else does, even if you're facing family pressure, just that the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got your back, I think is so comforting, and it's just something that um yeah, it makes like a world of difference, really.
I love that. And I'm just going to close off with this that, and this is to all the sisters that are not married yet. Stop putting, because this is what society has taught you, this is what your family might be telling you, but stop putting your worth in whether you are married or not. Your worth is in your relationship with Allah, it's in your connection with Him. It is not in your marital status. Your worth does not go up when you get. I know that's not what society tells us. I mean, every week, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? Like but that's not where your worth lies. Your worth lies in your connection to Allah. And enjoying those words and the auntie saying all of these things, which can be very hurtful, make sabr with that, connect to Allah with that, don't internalize it. And where you are internalizing it, that's part of your healing work as well, because you do not want to get married from a perspective of just letting, like, I didn't get left. I am worth something. You don't have anything to prove through someone picking you. You don't have anything to prove. Even if you haven't been picked, quote unquote, yet, that's part of Allah's plan. Your connection with Him is more important than, honestly, even your marriage. It is. We don't talk about this enough, but your connection to Allah is more important than marriage, because when you stand before Him, it'll be you and Him. In that grave, you're going to be on your own. We are all solo in that grave. May Allah make it easy. Okay.
I mean,
Jazakallah khair, Mona. Thank you so much for joining us. Really,
exactly.
really appreciate. Hope everyone took a lot of benefit. If you did take any benefit from this, please remember us in your du'as, and may Allah forgive us if there's anything that we said that was wrong. And yeah, just goodness for everyone here. I'll see you all in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.